In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where empires span across star systems and alien civilizations have ruled for millennia, there exists a simple truth that even the most advanced species have forgotten. Courage isn't about having no fear. It's about standing firm when everything inside you screams to run. Today, in the obsidian halls of the Zephyrian Empire's most sacred palace, that truth would be written in blood and determination. While an entire regiment of the galaxy's finest warriors fled in terror, one human would discover that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can topple the mightiest of thrones. This is the story of Marcus Chun, a low-ranking maintenance worker who became a legend not through strength or technology, but through something far more dangerous to tyrants everywhere: the refusal to bow. The maintenance tunnels beneath the Zephyrian Imperial Palace reeked of ozone and fear. Marcus Chun pressed his back against the cold metal wall, listening to the thunderous footsteps above as another squad of elite guards rushed toward the throne room. The vibrations traveled through the ship's hull like a death drum, each beat marking another moment closer to catastrophe. Marcus had been fixing a faulty atmospheric recycler when the alarm started. Red lights bathed everything in crimson, and the ship's AI began its mechanical chant. Code Obsidian. All personnel to emergency stations. Code Obsidian. He'd heard about Code Obsidian in whispered conversations among the human workers. It meant someone had threatened the Queen directly in her own throne room. In 300 years of Zephyrian rule, it had never been called. Until today. He clutched his toolkit tighter, the familiar weight of his plasma torch and molecular welders providing little comfort. Above him, the palace groaned under the weight of mobilizing forces. The Zephyrians had conquered 47 star systems, not through diplomacy or trade, but through overwhelming military might. Their queen, Vexalia the Eternal, commanded respect across the galaxy not through love, but through the absolute certainty that defying her meant extinction. Marcus had worked on the Queen's personal ship for 2 years now, invisible among the thousands of maintenance staff that kept the massive vessel operational. Humans were considered a useful servant species, intelligent enough to handle complex repairs, but lacking the physical prowess or psychic abilities that made other races dangerous. They were perfect workers, grateful for steady employment, and too weak to pose any real threat. A new sound cut through the chaos above, the distinctive whine of Zephyrian particle weapons charging. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Those weapons were only used in the most dire circumstances. Whatever was happening in the throne room had escalated beyond a simple security threat. He made his way through the narrow maintenance shaft, following the blueprints burned into his memory from months of repairs. The human quarters were on the other side of the ship, but Marcus found himself drawn toward the source of the commotion. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps it was the stubborn streak that had gotten him into trouble throughout his life. His mother had always said he couldn't leave well enough alone. As he climbed through the service ladders toward the upper decks, the sounds of conflict grew clearer. Shouted commands in the harsh Zephyrian tongue, the hum of energy shields, and, underneath it all, something Marcus had never heard before in the palace: the sound of Zephyrian voices tight with genuine fear. The access panel near the throne room's upper gallery was hidden behind decorative crystal formations, designed to be invisible to anyone who didn't know the ship's internal structure. Marcus had installed some of the wiring behind those crystals just last month. As he carefully moved the maintenance cover aside, he could see down into the vast ceremonial chamber below. The sight that greeted him defied everything he thought he knew about the galaxy's balance of power. Queen Vexalia sat upon her throne of living obsidian, her 6-foot frame rigid with barely contained fury. Her chitinous exoskeleton, normally a deep purple that spoke of royal authority, had shifted to the angry red that Zephyrians displayed when their fight-or-flight instincts were triggered. Her 4 arms were spread wide, each ending in claws that could rend steel, while her large black eyes reflected the emergency lighting like dark mirrors. But it wasn't the queen that held Marcus's attention. It was the figure standing alone in the center of the vast chamber, surrounded by a semicircle of 30 Zephyrian guards, all with weapons drawn and energy shields raised. The intruder was humanoid, but clearly not human. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its body was covered in what looked like living armor that shifted and flowed like liquid metal. Most unsettling of all were its eyes, if they could be called eyes, which glowed with an internal fire that hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made Marcus's bones ache. Your reign ends today, Vexalia. Your empire built on the suffering of others will crumble to dust. The queen's mandibles clicked together in the Zephyrian equivalent of bitter laughter. Brave words from a creature that stands alone against my finest warriors. You may be powerful, but you are still only one. My guards have never failed me. Marcus watched, transfixed, as the creature simply stood there, radiating an aura of menace that seemed to press against the very air. The guards, each one a veteran of a dozen campaigns, held their positions, but Marcus could see the tremor in their clawed hands. These were soldiers who had stared down charging battle beasts and orbital bombardments without flinching, yet something about this single intruder had them on edge. Your guards are wise to fear, the creature said, and as it spoke, the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. They can sense what you, in your arrogance, cannot. The galaxy has grown tired of your rule. The smaller species you've enslaved, the worlds you've stripped bare, the countless lives sacrificed for your glory, all of it has consequences. Queen Vexalia rose from her throne, her full 8 feet of height impressive even compared to the intruder. Consequences? I am a consequence. I am the order that keeps this galaxy from tearing itself apart in petty wars. Without the Empire, there would be only chaos. Without the Empire, the creature replied, there would be freedom. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he'd almost forgotten during his years of quiet servitude. It was the same feeling he'd had as a child, reading the old stories about humanity's days of independence before the Zephyrian conquest. Stories his grandmother had whispered to him about a time when humans chose their own path among the stars. The queen gestured sharply with one of her secondary arms, and the guards began to advance. Their particle weapons hummed with lethal energy, and their ceremonial armor gleamed under the chamber's lights. Each guard was worth a dozen ordinary soldiers, enhanced with cybernetic implants and trained from childhood in the art of war. The creature didn't move. As the first guard came within striking distance, something extraordinary happened. The guard simply stopped, not frozen by some external force, but paralyzed by his own fear. His weapon lowered slightly, and Marcus could see the soldiers' breathing become rapid and shallow. One by one, the other guards slowed their advance, then stopped entirely. "What are you?" Queen Vexalia demanded, and for the first time in Marcus's experience, there was uncertainty in her voice. The creature turned its burning gaze upon her. "I'm the echo of every life your empire has extinguished. I'm the voice of every world you have silenced. I am the consequence of believing that power gives you the right to decide who lives and who dies." The temperature in the chamber continued to drop. Marcus could see his breath now, small puffs of vapor in the increasingly cold air. The guards were backing away slowly, their weapons still raised, but their resolve clearly shaken. "Impossible," the queen hissed. "You're just another pretender, another would-be conqueror who thinks they can take what I've built. Guards, destroy this creature now." But her guards were no longer listening. The nearest soldier took a hesitant step backward, then another. Soon they were all retreating, moving slowly but steadily toward the chamber's exits. Their weapons remained trained on the intruder, but it was clear they had no intention of getting closer. Marcus watched in amazement as 30 of the galaxy's most elite warriors, soldiers who had conquered star systems and brought entire species to their knees, fled from a single opponent who had yet to raise a hand against them. "Cowards," the queen shrieked. "Come back. That's an order." But the guard were already at the chamber's entrance, filing out in what could only be described as an organized retreat. Within moments, Queen Vexalia stood alone with the creature, abandoned by her own protectors. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus found himself holding his breath, afraid that even the smallest sound might draw attention to his hiding place. The queen and the intruder faced each other across the vast chamber, two ancient powers locked in a confrontation that would determine the fate of the galaxy. "Now," the creature said, its voice somehow both whisper quiet and thunderous, "we can speak honestly. Your guards are gone. Your weapons are useless against me. It's just you and me, and the truth of what your empire really is. Queen Vex'ahlia straightened, her royal bearing returning despite her obvious fear. You think this proves something? That frightening my guards makes you victorious? I'm still the ruler of 47 worlds. I still command fleets that could glass entire solar systems. Killing me would change nothing. Who said anything about killing you? The creature asked, and Marcus detected something like amusement in its tone. Death would be too easy, too clean. No, Vex'ahlia the Eternal, I have something far worse in mind for you. The queen's exoskeleton shifted to a deeper red, the color of fresh blood. What do you want? I want you to understand, to truly comprehend the weight of every choice you've made, every life you've casually destroyed, every dream you've crushed in the name of order. I want you to feel what your victims felt. As the creature spoke, the air around it began to shimmer. The living armor covering its body pulsed with internal light, and Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the very atoms of his body were vibrating in sympathy with some cosmic frequency. You speak in riddles, the queen snapped, but Marcus could hear the fear beneath her bravado. What are you? I am justice, the creature replied simply, and I am here to collect a debt that has been accumulating for 3 centuries. The chamber filled with an otherworldly light, and Marcus had to cover his eyes to avoid being blinded. When the glow faded, both figures remained standing, but something fundamental had changed. The air itself seemed charged with possibility, as if the basic rules of reality were being rewritten. Marcus realized he was witnessing history in the making. Whatever happened next would echo across the galaxy, changing the fate of billions of beings. And somehow, despite being just a maintenance worker hiding in an air vent, he felt connected to it all. The creature raised one hand, and Queen Vex'ahlia stumbled backward as if struck by an invisible blow. But she wasn't physically harmed. Instead, her face showed a dawning horror that suggested something far worse than mere violence. What have you done to me?" she whispered. "I have given you a gift," the creature replied. "The gift of empathy. For the first time in your life, you can feel what others feel. The pain of every being who has suffered under your rule, the despair of every parent who has lost a child to your wars, the hopelessness of every slave in your factories. All of it, flowing through your consciousness like a river of sorrow." The queen collapsed to her knees, her hands clutching at her head as if she could physically tear away whatever the creature had done to her. Her cries of anguish echoed through the empty chamber, the sound of a tyrant finally understanding the cost of tyranny. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. He was watching the most powerful being in the known galaxy reduced to a broken figure on the floor, overwhelmed by the weight of 3 centuries of suffering. It was both terrible and strangely beautiful, like watching a storm break after years of drought. But as he watched, Marcus began to realize something else. The creature's attention was entirely focused on Queen Vex'ahlia. It had achieved its goal of confronting her, but what came next? With the guards gone and the queen incapacitated, who would maintain order on the ship? Who would prevent the vessel from falling into chaos as word of what happened here spread throughout the empire? The answer, Marcus realized with growing dread, was no one. The creature seemed interested only in its confrontation with the queen, not in the larger consequences of its actions. And those consequences would affect every being on this ship, including the thousands of human workers who had no involvement in the Empire's crimes. As Queen Vex'ahlia's cries grew weaker, Marcus made a decision that would change his life forever. He couldn't just hide and watch. Whatever came next, someone needed to be present, someone needed to bear witness, and try to minimize the chaos that would inevitably follow. Taking a deep breath, Marcus Chun, maintenance worker and descendant of a once proud species, began to climb down from his hiding place toward the throne room floor. Marcus's boots made soft clicking sounds against the polished obsidian floor as he stepped into the throne room. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the vast chamber, echoing off the crystalline walls and drawing the attention of the dark creature that stood over Queen Vex'ahlia's trembling form. Those burning eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made his knees weak. Up close, the creature was even more imposing than it had appeared from above. Its presence seemed to fill the entire chamber, pressing against Marcus's consciousness like a weight that threatened to crush his mind. Yet somehow, he kept walking forward. "Human," the creature said, its voice carrying harmonics that resonated in Marcus's chest. "You should not be here. This does not concern your kind." Marcus stopped about 20 feet away, close enough to see the tears streaming down Queen Vexalia's face as she experienced centuries of accumulated anguish, but far enough to hopefully avoid whatever power this being wielded. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice remained steady when he spoke. "With respect, sir, it does concern me. I work on this ship. My people work on this ship. Whatever happens here affects all of us." The creature tilted its head, studying Marcus with what might have been curiosity. "Your species serves the Empire willingly. You maintain their machines, you follow their orders, you enable their oppression of others. How does that make you innocent?" It was a question Marcus had wrestled with during many sleepless nights in the cramped human quarters. He'd seen the cargo holds filled with resources stripped from conquered worlds. He'd repaired the weapons systems that had glassed entire cities. His skilled hands had helped maintain the very machinery of oppression. "You're right," Marcus said, surprising himself with his honesty. "We're not innocent, but most of us never had a choice. We were conquered just like everyone else. The only difference is that we were useful enough to keep alive." The creature's expression, if it could be called an expression, didn't change, but something in its posture suggested it was listening. Behind it, Queen Vexalia had curled into a ball on the floor, her royal robes spread around her like broken wings. The proud ruler who had commanded star fleets was now reduced to a whimpering shell, overwhelmed by the weight of empathy. "Choice," the creature mused. "An interesting concept. Tell me, human, what choice do you make now? I have broken your queen's mind, scattered her guards to the winds. Her empire will crumble within days as word of this spreads. What choice do you make in the chaos that follows?" Marcus looked around the empty throne room, imagining the panic that would soon spread through the ship when the crew realized their absolute ruler had been defeated. There would be confusion, fear, possibly violence, as different factions try to seize control. The human workers would be caught in the middle, as they always were. "I choose to try to help," Marcus said. "To try to make sure that when this ship falls apart, as few innocent people as possible get hurt in the process." "Help how?" "You are one maintenance worker among thousands of crew members. You have no authority, no weapons, no influence. What could you possibly do?" The question struck at the heart of Marcus's own doubts. What could he do? He was nobody special, just another cog in the vast machine of empire. But as he stood there, facing this cosmic force of justice, he realized that being nobody special might actually be an advantage. "I know this ship better than anyone," Marcus said, his confidence growing as he spoke. "I've crawled through every maintenance tunnel, fixed every critical system, worked with every department. The crew might not know my name, but they know my work. They trust me to keep the lights on and the air flowing. Maybe that trust means something now." The creature was silent for a long moment, its burning gaze fixed on Marcus's face. Finally, it spoke. "You would stand between the Empire's collapse and the chaos that follows? You would try to impose order where I have brought justice?" "No," Marcus said firmly. "I wouldn't impose anything. But maybe I can help people find their own way through what comes next. Maybe I can help them choose something better than what they had before." Queen Vexalia's sobs had quieted to broken whispers. Marcus could see that whatever the creature had done to her had fundamentally changed something in her mind. The woman who had ruled through fear and absolute authority was gone, replaced by someone drowning in the accumulated suffering of her victims. "What will happen to her?" Marcus asked, nodding toward the fallen queen. "She will live," the creature replied. "She will live with the full knowledge of every life her empire has destroyed, every dream it has crushed. She will feel their pain as if it were her own, because now it is her own. It is a far more fitting punishment than death." Marcus felt a chill of horror mixed with awe. It was justice, but of a kind so absolute and terrible that it bordered on cosmic cruelty. Yet he couldn't deny that Queen Vexalia deserved to understand the cost of her actions. And the Empire, the fleets, the conquered worlds, the billions of beings living under Zephyrian rule. That, the creature said, is no longer my concern. My task was to confront the architect of this oppression. What happens next is up to those who have lived under her rule. The implications of that statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. Across 47 star systems, Zephyrian governors and military commanders would soon learn that their absolute ruler had been defeated. Some would try to maintain control through force. Others would attempt to carve out their own little empires. Still others might simply abandon their posts and flee. In the chaos that followed, millions could die in civil wars, resource conflicts, and revenge killings. But that's not justice, Marcus protested. That's just replacing one kind of suffering with another. The creature's eyes flared brighter, and Marcus felt the temperature in the chamber drop another few degrees. Do not presume to lecture me about justice, human. I have seen the rise and fall of 1,000 empires. I have watched civilizations burn and be reborn from their ashes. What you call chaos, I call opportunity. The chance for something new to emerge from the ruins of tyranny. But what if what emerges is worse? What if the chaos leads to even more oppression, more suffering? Then, that will be the choice of those who inherit this galaxy. I cannot force beings to be better than they are. I can only remove the obstacles that prevent them from choosing their own path. Marcus realized he was arguing philosophy with a cosmic force, but he couldn't stop himself. Everything he'd ever believed about right and wrong, about responsibility and consequence, was being challenged by this conversation. My grandmother used to tell me stories, Marcus said, surprising himself by bringing up such a personal detail. Stories about Earth before the conquest, about how humanity tried to govern itself. It wasn't perfect. There were wars, inequality, environmental damage. But it was ours. We owned our mistakes and our successes both. The creature's attention sharpened. And what happened to your species' independence? The Zephyrians happened. They offered us protection from hostile alien species, advanced technology, membership in their empire. Some humans welcomed it. Others fought against it. In the end, it didn't matter. We were too weak to resist, too divided to present a united front. We became what we are now, useful servants in someone else's empire. And yet here you stand, alone before me, speaking of choice and responsibility. Perhaps your species has not lost as much as you believe. Marcus felt something shift in the conversation. The creature was no longer simply explaining its actions. It was testing him, probing to see what lay beneath his humble exterior. Maybe not, Marcus agreed. But standing here talking to you is easy compared to what comes next. When word of this spreads, there will be panic. The other species in the Empire will see an opportunity for revenge against their Zephyrian oppressors. The Zephyrian military will try to maintain control through increasingly brutal methods. And species like mine, the servants and slaves, will be caught in the middle, as they have always been caught in the middle. The difference now is that they have a choice in how they respond. Choice requires knowledge, Marcus pointed out. It requires time to think, to plan, to organize. In the chaos that's coming, most beings won't have any of those things. They'll just react, and most reactions will be based on fear and anger. The creature was quiet for a long time, its burning gaze shifting between Marcus and the broken form of Queen Vexalia. When it finally spoke, its voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. You argue well for maintenance worker. Tell me, human, if you had the power to shape what comes next, what would you do? Marcus had to think carefully before answering. This was clearly a crucial moment, though he wasn't sure why. I try to give people time. Time to understand what had happened. Time to make informed decisions rather than just reactions. I try to prevent the immediate violence that would come from confusion and fear. And I try to help different species communicate with each other to find common ground instead of just settling old scores. A noble vision, the creature acknowledged. But how would you accomplish it? You speak of preventing violence and promoting communication, but you have no army, no fleet, no authority that anyone would recognize. I have something better, Marcus said, the answer coming to him as he spoke. I have nothing to lose and no agenda beyond helping people survive. Nobody sees me as a threat because I'm not one. Maybe that lets me go places and talk to people that others couldn't. The creature nodded slowly. Interesting. And what are your fellow humans? Would they follow where you lead? Marcus thought of his co-workers, engineers and technicians, medics and janitors, all the invisible people who kept the Empire's machinery running. They weren't leaders or warriors, but they were competent, dedicated, and tired of being powerless. Maybe, he said honestly, if I could show them that there was a better path forward than just waiting to see which new master would claim us. If I could convince them that this time, we might actually have a chance to choose our own future. The creature raised one hand, and Marcus tensed, expecting some kind of attack. Instead, he felt a strange, tingling sensation, as if every atom in his body was being examined and cataloged. Marcus Chun, the creature said, and Marcus was startled to hear his own name spoken in that cosmic voice. Maintenance Technician 3rd Class, assigned to atmospheric recycling systems. Born on the colony world of New Geneva, orphaned during a Zephyrian police action when you were 7 years old. Raised by your grandmother until her death, then recruited into Imperial service through the Human Cooperation Protocol. How do you know all that? I know many things. I know that you scored in the top percentile on every technical examination, but consistently declined promotions that would have moved you away from hands-on work. I know that you send half your salary to support elderly humans in the refugee camps. I know that you've never reported a co-worker for minor infractions, even when doing so might have earned you personal benefits. Marcus felt exposed, as if his entire life had been laid bare for examination. Why does any of that matter? Because the creature said, I have decided to give you a gift. Before Marcus could ask what kind of gift, the creature stepped forward and placed one hand on his forehead. The touch was surprisingly gentle, considering the power that's being clearly wielded. But the effect was immediate and overwhelming. Knowledge flooded into Marcus's mind. Not just information, but understanding. He could suddenly see the political structure of the empire in crystal clear detail, understanding the relationships between different species, the economic dependencies, the military hierarchies. He could see which systems were most likely to descend into chaos, which governors might be reasoned with, which alien species harbored the deepest resentments against their oppressors. More than that, he could sense something like a network, threads of connection linking every maintenance worker, every technician, every invisible servant throughout the empire. The people who kept the lights on, who maintained the ships, who processed the food and cleaned the air, and ensured that civilization continued to function despite the grand political dramas playing out above their heads. What would you do to me? Marcus gasped as the visions finally stopped. I gave you the knowledge you will need, the creature replied. And I gave you access to something your empire's builders never anticipated, a communications network that spans every ship, every station, every world they control. Marcus realized what the creature meant. The maintenance workers, the technical staff, the service personnel, they all used the same basic communication protocols, the same repair requests, the same supply chains. It was a network that existed parallel to the official military and political structures, invisible to those in power, because it was too mundane to notice. But why me? Why not someone with actual authority, someone who could make real changes? The creature stepped back, its form beginning to shimmer around the edges, as if it were preparing to leave. Because authority is what created this mess in the first place. What comes next cannot be built on the foundation of one person commanding others. It must be built on cooperation, on beings choosing to work together because they see the value in doing so. Queen Vexalia stirred on the floor, her eyes opening to stare at nothing. Marcus could see that she was conscious, but lost in an internal hell of unwanted empathy and crushing guilt. What should I do with her? Marcus asked. Whatever you think is right, the creature replied. She is no longer capable of ruling, but she is still a living being who will need food, shelter, care. How you and others choose to treat her will say much about what kind of civilization you build from the Empire's ashes. The chamber was growing brighter as the creature's form became more translucent. Marcus realized he had only moments left to ask the questions that suddenly seemed vitally important. Will I see you again? If things go wrong, if people choose violence and oppression over cooperation, will you intervene again? The creature's voice seemed to come from a great distance now. My role here is finished. What happens next is entirely in the hands of those who inhabit this galaxy. Choose wisely, Marcus Chun. The future is a blank page, and you hold the pen. With that, the creature vanished, leaving Marcus alone in the throne room with the broken queen and the weight of impossible responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. For a long moment, Marcus just stood there, trying to process everything that had happened. Then, slowly, he walked over to Queen Vexalia and knelt beside her. She looked up at him with eyes full of pain and confusion. Who are you?" she whispered. "My name is Marcus Chun," he said gently. "I'm here to help." It was the first lie he'd told since this all began. He had no idea how to help anyone, least of all a fallen tyrant drowning in the suffering she'd caused. But he knew he had to try. The future of the galaxy had just been placed in the hands of a maintenance worker, and Marcus Chun was determined not to let it fall. The first sign of chaos came exactly 17 minutes after the creature vanished. Marcus was still kneeling beside Queen Vexalia, trying to get her to drink water from his maintenance kit, when the ship's communication system crackled to life. "All hands, this is Commander Thexval in the security center. We have lost contact with the throne room guard detail. Repeat, 30 elite guards have gone missing. The Queen is not responding to communication attempts. This ship is now under full military lockdown. No one enters or leaves their assigned sections without authorization." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Commander Thexval was Queen Vexalia's second-in-command, a Zephyrian military veteran known for his brutal efficiency. If he was taking control of the ship, the next few hours would be very dangerous for anyone who couldn't prove their loyalty. The Queen stirred at the sound of Thexval's voice, her mandibles clicking weakly. He will kill everyone," she whispered. "If he thinks there's been a coup, he'll execute anyone who might be a threat. It's what I trained him to do." Marcus felt the weight of the knowledge the creature had given him. He could see the ship's layout in his mind, understand the security protocols, predict how Thexval would respond to this crisis. The commander would seal off all access to the throne room, then begin systematic interrogations of every crew member. Anyone who couldn't account for their whereabouts during the incident would be considered suspect. "How long before he realizes you're missing?" Marcus asked. 20 minutes, the Queen replied. "There's a scheduled check-in. When I don't respond, he'll come looking." Marcus did rapid calculations in his head. 20 minutes to figure out how to explain the situation without triggering a ship-wide massacre. 20 minutes to somehow convince a paranoid military commander that his queen had been magically transformed by a cosmic entity of justice. It wasn't enough time. Is there a way to contact him directly? Some kind of emergency communication that bypasses normal protocols? Queen Vexalia nodded weakly toward her throne. "There's a control panel in the left armrest, but you need my biometric signature to access it." Marcus helped her to her feet, surprised by how frail she seemed now. The proud ruler who had commanded 47 star systems could barely walk without support. He guided her to the throne, noting how she flinched away from its obsidian surface as if it burned her. "The panel," she said, indicating a smooth section of the throne's arm. When she pressed her hand against it, hidden controls materialized in the air above the surface. What should I tell him? It was a good question. How do you explain that you've been fundamentally changed by an encounter with cosmic justice? How do you tell your most trusted enforcer that the empire you've built together is ending? Tell him the truth, Marcus said. Tell him that you've had a revelation about the empire's crimes and that you're abdicating your throne. Tell him that you're placing the ship under my authority temporarily while new leadership arrangements are made. The Queen stared at him in shock. Under your authority? You're a maintenance worker. He'll never accept that. He'll have to, Marcus replied grimly, because the alternative is watching this ship tear itself apart while word spreads across the empire that their queen has fallen. Queen Vexalia's expression showed the internal struggle between her old instincts for control and her new understanding of the suffering that control had caused. Finally, she activated the communication panel. "Thexval," she said, her voice stronger than Marcus had expected. "Stand down the lockdown. I am unharmed." The response came immediately. "My queen, where are your guards?" We detected weapons fire and then complete radio silence. The guard were dismissed. I needed to speak privately with someone. "Commander, I am issuing new orders. The human maintenance worker Marcus Chun is to be given full access to all ship systems and communications. He speaks with my authority." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could practically feel Thexval's confusion and suspicion through the communication link. "My queen, I don't understand. What human? Why would you give authority to a maintenance worker?" Queen Vexalia looked at Marcus, her eyes showing a depth of pain that hadn't been there before her transformation. Because, my old friend, I have seen the truth of what we've built together. This empire, our great achievement, is nothing more than a machine for creating suffering. It must end. My queen, you're not well. You need medical attention. I'm coming to the throne room immediately. No. The force in her voice surprised everyone, including herself. Thexval, you'll follow my orders. You will grant Marcus Chun the access I've specified, and you will not interfere with his actions aboard this ship. This is my final command as your queen. The communication channel went silent for a long moment. When Thexval spoke again, his voice carried a note of dangerous confusion. As you wish, my queen, but I must respectfully request a face-to-face meeting to confirm these orders. Security protocol demands it. Marcus knew they were running out of time. Thexval was clearly planning to override his queen's orders the moment he saw her condition. A loyal officer faced with an apparently compromised commander would do exactly what his training dictated: remove the threat and restore proper order. Queen Vexalia, Marcus said urgently, I need you to think. Is there anyone on this ship who might support a transition away from the Empire? Anyone who's expressed doubts about the current system? She was quiet for a moment, her new empathy allowing her to consider her subordinates as actual people for the first time in decades. Dr. Silas, she said finally, the chief medical officer. He's questioned some of our policies regarding conquer populations. And Engineer Corthin in the drive section. She's young for her position, very idealistic. Marcus felt a spark of hope. With the knowledge the creature had given him, he could see the connections those names represented. Dr. Silas had medical authority that could override military orders in cases of health emergencies. Engineer Corthin controlled the ship's primary systems, including life support and propulsion. If he could get them on his side before Thexval arrived. I need to contact them, Marcus said. Can you patch me into the ship's general communication system? The authorization I gave you should allow that, the Queen replied. But Marcus, be careful. If Thexval realizes what you're doing, he'll consider it mutiny. The penalty for that is immediate execution. Marcus activated the communication panel, his hands surprisingly steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to attempt. He'd fixed this system a dozen times, but he'd never imagined using it to address the crew of the Empire's flagship. Attention all personnel, this is Marcus Chun, Human Maintenance Technician 3rd Class, speaking under the direct authority of Queen Vexalia. I am addressing you today because our galaxy stands at a crossroads. He paused, knowing that across the ship, thousands of crew members were stopping what they were doing to listen. Zephyrians, Altarians, Vexani, and dozens of other species, all united in their confusion about why a human maintenance worker was speaking with royal authority. Many of you know me by my work, if not by my name. I've fixed your atmospheric recyclers, repaired your data terminals, maintained the systems that keep this ship functioning. Today, I'm asking you to trust that same dedication to keeping things working, but on a larger scale. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. Queen Vexalia has announced her intention to abdicate the throne and dissolve the Empire. This decision comes after a profound realization about the suffering that our government has caused across the galaxy. The age of the Zephyrian Empire is ending, but what comes next is up to all of us. The communication system remains silent, but Marcus could imagine the chaos his words were causing throughout the ship. Crew members staring at speakers in shock, officers trying to decide whether this was some kind of elaborate test, soldiers wondering if they should report to their stations or wait for orders that might never come. I know this is confusing and frightening. Change always is. But I want you to understand something important. This is not a coup or a revolution. No one is seizing power. Instead, power is being distributed back to the people who have always really made civilization work. The doctors who heal the sick, the engineers who maintain our technology, the teachers who preserve knowledge, the workers who grow our food and build our homes. Dr. Silas's voice suddenly cut in on the communication channel. This is Chief Medical Officer Silas. I can confirm that Queen Vexalia is conscious and coherent. Her statements about the Empire should be taken as legitimate expressions of her will. A moment later, another voice joined the channel. This is Chief Engineer Corthin. I'm monitoring all ship systems, and can confirm that there are no immediate threats to vessel integrity or crew safety. All personnel should remain calm and await further instructions. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude toward the two officers who had just put their careers and possibly their lives on the line to support his unlikely authority. But he knew Commander Thexval wouldn't be far behind, and when he arrived, things would get much more complicated. "Here's what I'm proposing," Marcus continued, his voice carrying the confidence that came from knowing he was doing the right thing, regardless of the consequences. "We're going to turn this ship into something new. Not a symbol of imperial power, but a symbol of cooperation. We're going to contact other ships in the fleet, other worlds in the Empire, and we're going to offer them a choice. They could try to maintain the old system through force, or they can join us in building something better." He could hear footsteps in the corridor outside the throne room, heavy, armored footsteps that could only belong to military personnel. Thexval was coming, probably with a full squad of loyal soldiers. "I know many of you are thinking that this is impossible, that a maintenance worker can't possibly understand the complexities of governing a star-spanning empire. You're absolutely right. I can't do it alone. But together, all of us working as equals rather than as rulers and subjects, we can figure it out as we go." The footsteps were getting closer. Marcus could see the queen tensing on her throne, preparing for the confrontation with her former enforcer. "To those of you who choose to join us, I promise this. Your voice will be heard, your needs will be considered, and your dignity will be respected. To those who choose to maintain the old system, I ask only that you do so somewhere else. This ship is no longer part of the Zephyrian Empire." The throne room doors burst open, and Commander Thexval strode in with 6 armed guards. The Zephyrian military officer was an imposing figure even by his species standards, standing over 7 feet tall and covered in ceremonial armor that had seen actual combat. His mandibles were spread wide in aggressive display, and his 4 arms were positioned to draw weapons at a moment's notice. "Queen Vexalia," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury, "step away from that human. You're clearly under some form of duress or mental influence." The queen slowly stood from her throne, and Marcus was struck by how small she looked compared to her former subordinate. But when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had ruled star systems for 3 centuries. "Thexval, old friend, I'm exactly where I choose to be. Marcus Chin speaks with my full authority, and my orders regarding him stand." The commander's eyes fixed on Marcus with undisguised hostility. "A human giving orders aboard the flagship of the Zephyrian Empire? This is madness. My queen, whatever this creature has done to you, we can fix it. Dr. Silas can examine you, determine what kind of mental conditioning or chemical influence is affecting your judgment." Dr. Silas's voice came over the communication system again. "Commander Thexval, I have already examined the queen remotely using the throne room's biometric sensors. She shows no signs of external mental influence or chemical alteration. Her brain patterns are consistent with someone who has experienced a profound psychological revelation, but she is in full control of her faculties." Thexval snarled, a sound that made Marcus's skin crawl. "Psychological revelation? The queen doesn't have revelations. She has policy objectives and strategic goals. Whatever has happened here, it ends now." He gestured to his guards, who raised their weapons toward Marcus. But before they could fire, something unexpected happened. "Stand down." The order came from Engineer Corthin over the ship's communication system. "I am implementing Emergency Protocol 7. All weapons systems aboard this vessel are now offline." The guard tried to fire their weapons, but nothing happened. The energy cells had been remotely deactivated, rendering the weapons useless. Commander Thexval stared at his subordinates in shock, clearly not having anticipated that his own crew would turn against him. "Corthin," he growled into his communicator, "you are relieved of duty for insubordination. Override the weapons lockdown immediately." "I'm sorry, Commander," came the reply, "but I'm following the direct orders of Queen Vexalia as transmitted through her designated representative. All weapons aboard this ship will remain offline until further notice." Marcus stepped forward, knowing this was the crucial moment. He had to convince Thexval to step down peacefully, or the ship would descend into chaos as different factions fought for control. "Commander," he said respectfully, "I know this is difficult to understand. everything you believed about duty and orders being challenged. But I'm asking you to look around and really see what your empire has become. I see traitors and fools, Thexval replied. I see the natural order being overturned by soft-hearted idealists who don't understand the realities of governing a galaxy. No, Marcus said firmly. You see people who are tired of being told that oppression is necessary for order, that suffering is the price of civilization. You see beings who want to choose their own path instead of having it chosen for them. The Queen stepped forward, moving to stand beside Marcus. Thexval, how many worlds have we conquered together? How many species have we subjugated? How many children have been orphaned by our wars? All necessary, the commander replied without hesitation. All done to prevent greater chaos. I thought so too, the Queen said sadly. But I was wrong. We both were. The chaos we prevented was chaos that threatened our power. The order we maintained was order that benefited us at the expense of everyone else. Marcus could see the internal struggle on Thexval's face. The Zephyrian officer had dedicated his life to serving his queen, and now that same queen was telling him that their life's work had been built on a lie. You have a choice, Commander, Marcus said gently. You can try to fight us, try to restore the old system through force. But look around you. Your weapons don't work, your own officers are supporting the transition, and across the Empire, other ships and world are going to face the same choice we're facing here. You could be part of the solution, or you could be part of a problem that's already solved. Thexval was quiet for a long moment, his forearms trembling slightly with suppressed rage. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. What happens to soldiers like me in your new galaxy? We are weapons, Commander Chun. We know only how to fight and conquer. What use are we in a universe of cooperation and understanding? It was a profound question, and one that Marcus realized would be asked by millions of beings across the Empire as the old order collapsed. What did you do with people whose entire identity was built around roles that no longer had a place in a just society? I don't know, Marcus admitted, but I think that's something we'll have to figure out together. Maybe former soldiers become teachers, sharing their knowledge of strategy and organization. Maybe they become explorers, using their courage and discipline to map new star systems. Maybe they become protectors, defending the vulnerable from the chaos that will inevitably come as the Empire falls. He looked directly at Thexval, seeing past the armor and weapons to the person underneath. What I do know is that everyone deserves a chance to be more than what they've been forced to be, including you. The commander stood in silence, processing Marcus's words. Around them, the throne room felt charged with possibility. The sense that history was being written in real time by ordinary people making extraordinary choices. Finally, Thexval raised his hand to his communicator. All security personnel, this is Commander Thexval. Stand down from lockdown protocols. Await further orders from the new command structure. He looked at Marcus with something that might have been respect. I don't understand what you're trying to build, human, but I've spent my life following orders from rulers who claim to know what was best for everyone. Maybe it's time to see what happens when people are allowed to decide for themselves. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. The first crisis had been resolved without bloodshed, but he knew it was only the beginning. Across the Empire, thousands of similar confrontations were about to take place as word of the Queen's abdication spread. Some would end peacefully, as this one had. Others would not. The future remained unwritten, but for the first time in centuries, it was truly in the hands of those who would have to live it. 3 days after Queen Vexalia's abdication, Marcus Chun found himself in the most unlikely position of his life, sitting in the former royal conference room, mediating a discussion between representatives from 17 different species about how to manage the galaxy's largest refugee crisis in recorded history. The transformation had begun almost immediately. Within hours of Marcus's broadcast from the throne room, similar declarations had come from 12 other ships in the Imperial fleet. Some commanders had chosen to support the transition peacefully. Others had attempted to maintain control through force, only to discover that their own crews were no longer willing to follow orders they considered unjust. The most dramatic example had come from the Dreadnought Subjugator, where the Zephyrian captain had attempted to execute his entire human maintenance staff rather than risk their contamination spreading to his ship. The execution had been prevented by an unlikely alliance between the ship's doctor, a young Altarian named Vostek, and the chief engineer, who had locked down the ship's systems, and announced that anyone attempting to harm crew members would be ejected into space. Marcus had watched the reports streaming in with a mixture of hope and horror. The knowledge the creature had given him allowed him to track the spreading revolution across the Empire's communication networks. For every peaceful transition, there were reports of violence as different factions struggled for control. Some worlds had declared independence immediately, only to find themselves defenseless against opportunistic raiders. Others had splintered into civil wars as old ethnic and territorial disputes resurfaced without the Empire's iron fist to suppress them. The situation on Kelvara Prime is deteriorating rapidly, reported Zixander, an insectoid Veltai who had become the unofficial coordinator for refugee movements. The local Zephyrian governor is attempting to maintain control by executing suspected dissidents. The civilian population is fleeing the cities, but they have nowhere to go. Marcus rubbed his tired eyes, trying to process the constant stream of crisis reports. Sleep had become a luxury he couldn't afford as more and more desperate messages arrived from across the former empire. The communication network that had once carried routine maintenance requests now carried pleas for help from millions of beings caught in the chaos of transformation. What resources do we have available for evacuation? Marcus asked. 17 transport vessels have volunteered for refugee operations, replied Captain Mordun, a gruff Altarian who commanded a former Imperial cargo hauler. But that's barely enough to handle a fraction of the displaced populations. We need a coordinated plan, not just random rescue missions. Dr. Silas leaned forward in his chair, his expression grave. The medical implications alone are staggering. We're dealing with beings from dozens of different species, all with different biological requirements. Setting up refugee camps that can accommodate everyone safely will require resources we simply don't have. Marcus looked around the conference table at the faces of people who had volunteered to help manage an impossible situation. None of them had been prepared for leadership roles in a galactic crisis, but they were the ones who had stepped forward when it mattered. Doctors and engineers, teachers and mechanics, beings whose only qualification for authority was their willingness to accept responsibility for others' welfare. We can't save everyone, Marcus said quietly, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. I know that sounds cruel, but we have to be realistic about what we can accomplish with the resources we have. We need to prioritize the most urgent cases and build our capacity to help more people over time. Engineer Corthan pulled up a holographic display showing the current status of the Empire's major worlds. Red indicators marked planets where violence was escalating, yellow showed worlds attempting peaceful transitions, and green indicated systems that had successfully established provisional governments. The good news, she said, is that approximately 30% of the former Empire's worlds are managing the transition without major violence. These planets had local leaders who were able to maintain order while establishing new governmental structures. And the bad news? Marcus asked, though he could see the answer in the predominance of red indicators on the display. 40% are experiencing significant civil unrest, with at least 10 worlds reporting active warfare between different factions. The remaining 30% have gone completely dark. We're not receiving any communications from them at all. Commander Thexval, who had become an unexpected ally in the transition planning, studied the display with his military strategist's eye. The dark zones are the most concerning. They could indicate complete governmental collapse, successful suppression of communications by authoritarian remnants, or, he paused, clearly reluctant to voice his worst fears, or total societal breakdown. Marcus finished for him. World where the infrastructure has collapsed entirely, and people are fighting over basic resources like food and water. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of responsibility. These weren't abstract political discussions. Every red indicator on the map represented millions of real beings whose lives had been thrown into chaos by the Empire's fall. Zixander's communicator chirped with an incoming priority message. After listening to the brief transmission, his antennae drooped with what Marcus had learned was a sign of distress among his species. The situation has become more complicated, Zixander announced. We're receiving reports that several former Imperial governors are attempting to form their own mini-empires. Governor Krexloth of the Tau sector has declared himself protector of civilized space and is demanding that all independent worlds in his region submit to his authority or face pacification. Marcus felt his heart sink. This was exactly what he had feared would happen, that the collapse of the empire would simply lead to the rise of smaller, potentially more brutal tyrannies. The knowledge the creature had given him included detailed psychological profiles of many imperial officials, and Krexloth was one of the worst. A Zephyrian traditionalist who believed that might made right, and that weaker species existed solely to serve stronger ones. How many worlds has he threatened? Marcus asked. 17 so far, including 3 that had successfully established democratic provisional governments. He's giving them 72 hours to surrender or face bombardment. The conference room erupted in angry voices as representatives from different species began talking over each other. Marcus could hear fragments of the arguments, some calling for military intervention, others insisting that they lacked the resources to fight former imperial forces, still others suggesting that they should focus on protecting the worlds they could help rather than trying to save those already under threat. Enough, Marcus said, raising his voice to be heard over the chaos. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. He realized with a start that these people, beings from across the galaxy who had never worked together before, were looking to him for answers he didn't have. Taking a deep breath, Marcus activated the communication panel that connected them to the broader network of former Imperial ships and worlds that had joined what some are calling the Cooperation Coalition. Attention all Coalition members, this is Marcus Chun aboard the flagship Eternal Harmony. He began, still feeling strange about speaking with such authority. We're facing our first major test as a free association of worlds. Former Governor Krexloth is threatening to reimpose imperial rule by force in the Tau sector. We need to decide how we're going to respond. The responses came quickly, streaming in from across the galaxy. This is Captain Velandra of the transport ship Peaceful Wanderer. We didn't overthrow one empire just to fight wars against another one. Our resources should go to helping refugees, not military action. Commander Yafei K of the defense platform Vigilant Guardian here. If we allow Krexloth to succeed, every other ambitious governor will follow his example. Sometimes the only way to prevent war is to demonstrate that aggression has consequences. Dr. Lissera from the hospital ship Mercy's hand. Any military action will create more casualties and more refugees. We're already overwhelmed trying to help the displaced populations from the worlds currently in crisis. Marcus listened to the cascade of voices, each representing valid concerns and legitimate perspectives. This was the challenge he had known would come. How do you make collective decisions when the stakes are enormous and every choice involves difficult trade-offs? I want to propose something, Marcus said, cutting through the debate. We don't have to choose between military action and humanitarian aid. We can offer a third option. He paused, formulating his thoughts as he spoke. The knowledge the creature had given him included not just information about imperial structures, but also insights into the psychology of power and the dynamics of revolutionary change. Krexloth is counting on fear to make his threats effective. He's betting that the world in his sector are too frightened and disorganized to resist him. But what if we could show them that they're not alone? What if we could demonstrate that cooperation is stronger than coercion? Engineer Corthan looked intrigued. What are you proposing specifically? We organize a massive humanitarian mission to the Tau sector. Not a military invasion, but a peace flotilla. We bring medical supplies, food, technical assistance, and, most importantly, proof that there's an alternative to submitting to another would-be emperor. Somander Tgedwal Fronet. Krexloth won't hesitate to fire on civilian vessels if he sees them as a threat to his authority. That's exactly why it will work, Marcus replied. If he attacks ships bringing medical aid and food to desperate populations, he reveals himself as exactly the kind of tyrant people are trying to escape. But if he allows the mission to proceed, we demonstrate that cooperation can provide what coercion cannot. Dr. Silas nodded slowly. It's a calculated risk. We'd be gambling the lives of everyone on those ships that Krexloth won't be willing to become known as someone who murders relief workers. The risk is real, Marcus acknowledged. But consider the alternative. If we respond with military force, We legitimize the idea that power disputes are settled through violence. If we do nothing, we abandon millions of beings to whatever form of oppression Krexloth chooses to impose. This gives us a chance to demonstrate that there's a third way. The debate continued for hours as representatives from across the coalition weighed the proposal. Some worlds volunteered ships and supplies immediately. Others expressed serious reservations about risking their citizens' lives. A few suggested that the plan was naive idealism that would get people killed for no practical benefit. Finally, as the discussion began to circle back on itself, an unexpected voice joined the conversation. It was Queen Vexalia, speaking publicly for the first time since her abdication. "I would like to address the coalition," she said, her voice carrying a weight of authority that hadn't diminished despite her transformation. "I have remained silent during your deliberations because I believe that those who created problems should not be the ones to solve them. But this situation requires perspective that only comes from experience with imperial power structures." Marcus activated the visual communication link, and the Queen's image appeared in the conference room. She looked older than she had just days before, the constant weight of empathic connection to her victims' suffering having aged her in ways that went beyond the physical. Krexloth was one of my most effective governors precisely because he understood that fear is more powerful than force. His real strength isn't his military. It's his reputation for ruthless efficiency. People submit to him not because they believe in his cause, but because they believe resistance is hopeless. She paused, her expression showing the pain that came with truly understanding the mechanisms of oppression she had once wielded. Marcus Chin's proposal is sound strategically because it attacks Krexloth's real weakness. He can only maintain power as long as people believe there are no alternatives. A successful humanitarian mission would prove that cooperation can achieve what coercion cannot. It would give hope to beings who have forgotten what hope feels like. Commander Thexval looked surprised. "My queen, you're endorsing a plan that could result in massive casualties if Krexloth decides to attack the relief ships." "Yes," she replied simply, "because the alternative, allowing fear to triumph over hope, would result in even greater suffering over a much longer period. Sometimes the choice isn't between safety and danger, but between different kinds of danger." The room was quiet as everyone processed the former tyrant's endorsement of a plan that went against every instinct of self-preservation and political calculation. Finally, Zixander spoke up. "If we're going to do this, we need to make it impossible for Krexloth to claim that we're a military threat. The mission has to be obviously, undeniably humanitarian in nature." "Agreed," Marcus said. "No weapons, no military vessels, no actions that could be interpreted as aggressive. Just ships full of supplies and people willing to help." Dr. Silas raised his hand. "I volunteer the medical ship Healing Touch. We're already equipped for humanitarian missions, and our presence would make it clear that this is about saving lives, not fighting battles." One by one, other volunteers came forward. Captain Mordun offered his cargo hauler. Engineer Corthan volunteered to lead a team of technical specialists to help restore damaged infrastructure. Even some of the more cautious representatives agreed to contribute supplies, if not personnel. As the planning session continued, Marcus felt something he had never experienced before. The sense that he was part of something larger than himself, something that might actually make the galaxy a better place for everyone. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. 3 hours later, they had a plan. 47 ships from across the former empire would converge on the Tau sector, carrying medical supplies, food, technical equipment, and, most importantly, proof that beings from different worlds could work together without anyone forcing them to do so. It was ambitious beyond reason, dangerous beyond calculation, and potentially the first step toward building the kind of galaxy the creature had made possible when it removed the Empire's stranglehold on civilization. As the conference room emptied, Marcus found himself alone with the communication panel, looking out at the stars through the viewport. Somewhere out there, Krexloth was preparing to crush anyone who defied his authority. In a few days, Marcus would find out whether cooperation really was stronger than coercion, or whether he had just organized the galaxy's largest humanitarian disaster. Either way, there was no going back. The future of the galaxy was about to be decided by ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and Marcus Chun maintenance worker turned unlikely revolutionary, was about to discover whether hope could triumph over fear when the stakes couldn't be higher. The humanitarian flotilla dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Tau sector exactly 71 hours after Governor Krexloth's ultimatum had expired. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Eternal Harmony, watching the tactical display as 47 vessels of every conceivable design materialized around them. Medical ships, cargo haulers, passenger transports, even a few repurposed mining vessels, all united by their crews' willingness to risk everything for the chance to prove that cooperation could triumph over coercion. Multiple contacts on approach vector, reported scanner technician Yulseth, a young Zephyrian who had joined the coalition when her previous commander ordered her to fire on civilian evacuation ships. Configuration matches Governor Krexloth's personal fleet. 12 heavy cruisers, 6 dreadnoughts, and, by the ancestors, that's a battleship. Marcus felt his stomach clench. The Imperial battleship Dominion was one of the most powerful vessels ever constructed, capable of glassing entire continents from orbit. If Krexloth had decided to make an example of the humanitarian mission, there wouldn't be enough left of their ships to fill a cargo container. "This is Governor Krexloth of the Tau Protectorate," came a transmission broadcast on all frequencies. "You are entering sovereign territory without authorization. Identify yourselves and state your business, or you'll be fired upon." Marcus activated the communication system, knowing that his next words might determine whether millions of beings lived in freedom or died under the boot of another tyrant. "Governor Krexloth, this is Marcus Chun, speaking for the Humanitarian Relief Coalition. We are here to provide medical assistance, food supplies, and technical support to the civilian populations of the Tau sector. We carry no weapons and represent no military threat to your forces." The response came after a long pause, and Marcus could hear the contempt in Krexloth's voice. Marcus Chun, the famous human who thinks he can remake the galaxy through sentiment and weakness. Tell me, maintenance worker, do you really believe that good intentions can stop particle cannons? "I believe that the universe is watching this conversation," Marcus replied calmly. "Every world in this sector, every ship in both our fleets, everyone who has suffered under Imperial rule, they're all waiting to see what kind of leader you really are. Are you someone who protects the people under your authority, or someone who prevents them from receiving help?" Through the viewport, Marcus could see the massive form of the Dominion moving closer, its weapons systems clearly powered and ready. But he could also see something else: the planets of the Tau sector, each one home to millions of beings who were watching this confrontation unfold. Dr. Silas's voice came over the Coalition communication network. "Medical ship healing touch to all vessels. We're detecting massive population centers on all 7 inhabited worlds in this system. Estimated total population is 2.8 billion beings, with clear signs of infrastructure damage and resource shortages on at least 4 worlds." Engineer Corthin added her report. "Technical analysis shows widespread power grid failures and atmosphere processor malfunctions. Without immediate assistance, several of these worlds will face environmental collapse within weeks." Marcus smiled grimly. His friends understood the strategy. By broadcasting detailed information about the humanitarian crisis in Krexloth's territory, they were making it impossible for him to claim that his rule was protecting anyone. "Governor," Marcus continued, "we've identified critical infrastructure failures that are threatening the lives of billions of your citizens. We have the technical expertise and supplies needed to address these problems. All we ask is permission to help." "I don't need help from coalition terrorists," Krexloth snarled. "My forces are perfectly capable of maintaining order in this sector." "Order isn't the same as safety," Marcus pointed out. "Your people are facing environmental disasters and resource shortages. Military force can't fix damaged atmosphere processors or restore failing power grids." Commander Thexval, monitoring communications from his position in the Fleet Coordination Center, suddenly spoke up on the Coalition channel. "I'm detecting multiple incoming transmissions from planetary surfaces. The local populations are requesting permission to accept humanitarian aid." That changed everything. Marcus realized that Krexloth wasn't just facing pressure from the Coalition fleet. He was dealing with his own people directly asking for help from the very forces he was threatening to destroy. "Governor Krexloth," Marcus said, It seems your citizens disagree with your assessment of their needs. Are you going to deny them access to medical treatment and emergency supplies? The silence that followed stretched for nearly 5 minutes. Marcus could imagine the furious consultations taking place aboard the Dominion as Krexloth tried to figure out how to maintain his authority while dealing with a crisis that exposed the limitations of military solutions. When the governor's voice returned, it carried a note of barely controlled rage. You are attempting to undermine legitimate governmental authority through manipulation and propaganda. I will not allow terrorist sympathizers to contaminate my sector with their poison. The only poison here is the idea that people need permission to receive help when they're dying, Marcus replied. But you have a choice, Governor. You can open fire on unarmed relief ships and become known throughout the galaxy as someone who murders doctors and engineers. Or you can allow us to provide assistance that your military forces cannot provide and be remembered as a leader who put his people's welfare above his own ego. Suddenly, a new voice joined the conversation, one that Marcus hadn't expected to hear. This is Captain Vorthek of the Planetary Defense Force for Tau Prime, came the transmission from the surface of the sector's main world. Governor Krexloth, with respect, I must inform you that my forces will not fire upon humanitarian vessels. The people of this world are suffering, and they deserve access to medical care and emergency supplies. More voices followed in rapid succession. Defense Commander Shexera of Tau Secondary. We will not participate in attacks on relief ships. Colonel Morthak of Tau Tertiary. My troops are standing down from combat readiness. We joined a military to protect people, not to prevent them from receiving help. Captain Lisiva of the Orbital Defense Platform. I'm opening a safe corridor for humanitarian vessels to reach planetary orbit. Marcus watched in amazement as Krexloth's own military commanders openly defied his authority. The knowledge the creature had given him had included insights into the psychology of power, but he had never dared hope that it would work so effectively. By framing the situation as a choice between helping people and maintaining control, they had forced Krexloth's subordinates to confront the real purpose of their oath to serve. Traitors! Krexloth's voice cracked with fury. All of you will be court-martialed for insubordination. Governor, said Captain Vorthek calmly, perhaps it's time to consider whether the people who disagree with you are traitors or whether you've lost sight of what leadership actually means. The tactical display showed something remarkable happening. The ships of Krexloth's fleet were beginning to separate, with roughly half moving away from the humanitarian vessels, while the other half maintained their threatening positions. Even among his most loyal forces, the governor was facing open rebellion. Dr. Silas's voice cut through the tension. This is the medical ship Healing Touch requesting permission to approach Tau Prime. We have critical supplies for the refugee camps that Captain Vorthek has established in the northern